This is a shot from the rear of the car. This is the plate that's going to be coming off. It's held on by 4 bolts. 2 right here and 2 on the side towards the front. These are the other bolts. Drive shaft bolts. When I remove the drive shaft, I'm going to mark the drive shaft between the flange on the drive shaft, or I'm going to mark the drive shaft at the flange of the drive shaft and at the flange of the rear differential. So when I put the drive shaft back on, it'll be in its original position to where it won't be out of balance. Yep. So that's what we are removing today on this episode. The new one. Probably not a good position for the differential. It's basically disconnected from the front mounts and the back mount and just slid forward. I left the axles on. Let's look at this from here. Note to self, the part that sticks out further on the bushing. You see how this side is almost flush? And that side sticks out a little bit more. That goes towards the differential. This took a long time. One out, one more to go. It's about to be 10:30 at night right now. Finally, after all this time cutting, alright, got these guys out. So you can see the slit that I cut into it. This is what I was using. Yeah, a piece for the rest of the handle was missing, so I wasn't able to use the actual handle part, so I was just under there sawing it, holding it with my hand like that. And that's what happens. This was the first one I took out. I got a little impatient and started hammering it with a punch before I was able to cut completely through, and it's not going to come out unless you cut it completely through. That's what I ended up doing. I banged it up, then I just ended up cutting it, and then it popped right out. This one, I actually was a little more patient and yeah, cut it all the way through. And what you want to do is you get your punch and you just tap it on each side until it comes out. It's the fun part, putting the new ones in. I've decided that I am never installing OEM style rear self-frame bushings again. So I will explain what's going on here. This is the actual bushing itself. It's pressed in almost all the way. It needs less than a quarter left to go in, but it's currently stuck there because there's no way that I can get in any further. As you can see, how I have this set up is two types of backing plates. With a bolt going through one side, and then a nut, and what I do is I just screw this nut down. It'll bring the two plates together, and it'll squeeze the bushing in. And it was working until it got to that spot, and when it got to that spot, it just got real tight to where it wouldn't want to go in anymore. That's where I started pulling threads on the bolts. I've actually broken a bolt. This is the third bolt that I have on, and the threads are done. Basically, yeah, the threads are done on this, and it's not backing back out. So I'm at the point where I have to cut this guy out, cut it off so I can get the bolt off and find another bolt and try again. But man, this is not easy trying to get this thing in. Alright, so the first one's in, not all the way, but it's in. I'll give you another shot of the setup I have, of how it's going in. Yeah, just tighten and the bushing will go in. Alright, so I've gotten it this far in, and so basically if I keep going with just this setup that I have, that on the back and this guy on the front, what will happen is this center part right here will actually make contact with this part that's in the back, and basically when that happens, when you tighten it, and I'll explain it to you when I get out. I'm gonna try to explain to you guys how or what happened. I don't have the bushing. We're gonna use the old bushing. The new bushings are in the car, so we're gonna have to use our imagination. This is the center part that the bolt goes through. This is the outside part, and so if you can see that this center part actually sticks out further than this outer part. So what's happening is when I was inserting it into the rear subframe, and we're using this as a technique. Pretend the subframe's right here. It's squeezing it together, and then it gets to the point where it stops moving in, because if you can see, it does that. These two edge pieces actually compress against the center part, leaving a pretty big gap. So if you can think about it, while it's going in and this is pushing up, it's supposed to have enough room for this part to continue going before it hits this, because this part right here is supposed to be resting up against the back of the subframe, in turn pulling it in like that, and then eventually it stops, and then you keep tightening all you want. You're not going to compress that metal sleeve center part, and that's what happens sometimes. You pull a thread and you have to cut it off. So what I did, let me grab this tool, cut off a few of these guys. The first one, let's use this. This would be the back part of the subframe.
of the hole of the subframe. So that would, if you can see it, that would be like that, and that would be like that. As it's squeezing, see how it's not going in any further because it's hitting this part. So what I did was I cut off a couple of these guys, pull the back out, place it between the subframe part, the back of the subframe. So it acts like a spacer. You see where I'm going with this? Now that gap allows, now if you look close inside, there's room between this and what's supposed to be the subframe. It gives it a little spacer or a little gap that allows just that little extra piece that's sticking out, right there, just to go in a little bit further. Hope that little explanation was enough. I mean, or else I can just draw it next time, who knows.
They are in.
End of video installation tips using the old bearing again, or using the old bushing again. So I'm just gonna give a few little preparation techniques for the bushing before it gets inserted into the vehicle or into the subframe. The first thing I did was I have I have a I have a belt sander that basically what I did was I beveled the edges a little bit more with the table sander to give it a little bit more angle to allow me to kind of center it in a little bit better before when I install it into its place. Always use eye protection. You give it a little bevel, help it out. Another thing I did for the second bushing that I installed, I didn't do it on the first one, but I wish I would have. It's after I beveled it, I threw it in the freezer for an hour or two, and that theoretically will kind of shrink it a little bit due to the cold. So it'll make it a little bit easier when you put it in. I did it for the second one and it went in a lot smoother than the first one. The third thing, before you install it, right when you pull it out of the freezer, um, obviously you don't want to just let it sit out. You as soon as you pull it out the freezer, bring it straight to the subframe and try to start getting it in. But before you try to start getting it in, I would grab some lithium grease, multi-purpose. Just, put a little bit on the leading side of where you're gonna put the bushing in, and then on the actual subframe itself, I would dab a little bit on the circle outside part on the subframe where this guy will go in, and that seemed to help a lot. Also, the second one that I installed on the right side of the car went in a lot easier after I realized I needed this guy, and I put it in the freezer for about 2 hours, an hour to get it to shrink a little bit, and threw a little bit of grease on there. Use this technique first on the second one. When it pulled it in to where it would stop and hit, you know, that center part, and then you disassemble everything. Put this in between, and then just continue tightening it down, and it will get it in there. These pieces are out of a Seal Driver kit. Harbor Freight, look it up. Worth the investment. Um, for these guys, I had a washer, you know, between the hardware, and the only reason this happened is because I was tightening it down with this issue. I was tightening it down with this issue. It's the only reason why I have this big like indentation in one of my drivers. But the whole reason I bought the driver set was for these pieces to put it in, because I didn't want to cut out a piece of metal and drill it, blah blah blah. Plus I feel like these are still reusable. So yeah, that'll be the end of this video. I hope I had some informative tips, something that'll help you guys if you decide to take on this job yourself. I would recommend spending the extra 40-50 bucks and getting the polyurethane ones, so you don't have the issue of inserting this guy. But once I figured this trick out, once I figured that I needed this guy, it doesn't seem so bad anymore.
Three by three square. It actually fits that circle part that this guy goes into. This fits over it perfectly. And this back one, the biggest size for the Seal Driver kit, fits over it just like that. So that actually